The digital currency Bitcoin has grabbed a lot of headlines lately, but a new book argues it's really the technology behind Bitcoin, called blockchain, that has the ability to change the nature of money and business. Don Tapscott and his son Alex are the authors of Blockchain Revolution. The first question has to be, what is harder, writing a book with a family member or explaining to people what blockchain is? Alex?
Well, I'll answer that one. Writing a book with a family member, at least this experience, has been just tremendous.
It must be pretty cool.
It was very cool. And truthfully, going into it, we didn't really have many expectations. We've worked together in the past on previous projects, but it never tackled something quite this significant. And so it was anybody's guess how we would work together. And it turns out we work actually really well together.
We were talking about this before. I've not quite finished the book. It's a very good read in that one of the things that I think is great about it is it really does explain what this blockchain is. I think people have been passively following this. They've been hearing about blockchain behind Bitcoin. Just so we can really understand it, Don, what is blockchain and why is it so important here?
Well, we think it's the second generation of the internet. For the first generation, few decades, we've had the internet of information. But when I send you information like a PDF file or a PowerPoint or an email or even from a website, I'm not sending you the native information, I'm sending you a copy.
Yeah.
And that's fine as long as you don't get into assets that somebody owns. But if I have some money or a stock bond or a swap or a loyalty point or a music file or a deed or a license or any of the things that actually have value, if I give it to you, it's really important I don't still have it. And this is a huge problem in computer science for a long time. Blockchain solves it. And it solves it by enabling us to exchange assets, digital assets, in a peer-to-peer way without a powerful intermediary. Right now we rely on banks and governments and credit card companies and big social media companies to identify who we are and to settle transactions. Now this is done through clever code and mass collaboration.
And the whole thing behind it is that it's unhackable. Is anything actually unhackable? Can we trust this?
Well, nothing is completely unhackable, but it's a superior offering to what we have today. Don mentioned intermediaries, and certainly there are middlemen throughout just about every single business and institution and industry in the world. And generally speaking, these intermediaries do a pretty good job with certain limitations. And one of the big ones is that they're hackable. They all run on centralized servers, and anything that's centralized is vulnerable to attack. Ask any customer of JP Morgan, of Morgan Stanley, Apple, Target, Home Depot.
Sure.
I could go on, but we only have a few minutes here. So, and there are other issues as well. They tax the system, they levy a cost, they capture our data, preventing us from using it, potentially also undermining our privacy. And they exclude about 2 billion people from the global economy. These are people who have access to the internet, have access to technology, but who don't have access to basic financial services.
Well, and that is one of the really interesting things that I learned out of this, is that at first blush, blockchain and Bitcoin really feel about, sort of big finance, rich people. You also talk about how this can affect the world's poor with really positive outcomes. What do you mean by that?
Well, for example, 70% of the people in the world who own land have a flaky title to it.
Fair enough.
So you're in Honduras, some dictator comes along and says, I know you have a piece of paper, says you own your land. Our government computer says my friend owns your land. This actually happened, led to an overthrow of the government. So today in Honduras and other countries, governments are working to put land titles on a blockchain. And once it's on a blockchain, no dictator can mess with it. Because to mess with it, to hack that 10-minute block, because it's linked to the previous block and the previous block, you'd have to hack the entire history of transactions on that blockchain across computers all around the world at the same time, using the highest level of encryption in the light of the most powerful computing resource that exists today, estimated to be 5 to 20 times bigger than Google. And if you want to hack, for example, the entire Bitcoin blockchain, you'd need a lot of energy. One guy says one scientist said it's probably more energy than exists in the sun. And most people don't have that kind of energy available.
And then sort of for the richer side is the banks, the institutions. You quote a Spanish bank saying that blockchain could eliminate $20 billion in back office expenses without changing their underlying business model at all?
Well, this is where a lot of banks have come into the conversation. At first, they started off being a little bit wary of the whole thing, understandably, because the basis of this is a cryptocurrency, and that's inherently unknown to most banks. But now they're looking at it as a way to radically optimize, or I should say dramatically optimize their business by simply cutting costs. Because what blockchain technology enables you to do is move anything of value, be it a dollar, but also a stock or a bond or a title or a deed or the dividend or the yield on a financial instrument on a peer-to-peer basis without having to rely on back office, without having to rely on clearing houses, without having to rely on transfer agents. All of those are actually costs to banks, so they're looking to get rid of it. But there's a third category of financial services firms that are actually looking at it the right way, which is to say strategically. Because if you're looking at it and saying, I can cut costs on my existing business, really you should be asking yourself, will I still have an existing business with this technology? And if not, how should I be preparing for that future? So for example, trillions of dollars of financial instruments need to be digitized to this native blockchain format. Someone needs to do that. And the bank that takes the initiative there will be the one that ultimately captures the value.
This is wildly interesting stuff, and I wish we did have more time. We'll have to have you come back in when the next step of this comes out. But congratulations to the book, and thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, guys.